Our second session is called Scripting the Text and Navigating the Context, and primarily also looking at women's voices. It's called Speaking Against the Grain, to also explore what were the notes of dissent, what were the contributions, what were maybe some of the tenets which were rejected but which we feel are still relevant today. So in a way, Sir would also explain the space of the Constituent Assembly, and not just understand maybe the arguments without the context, which I think was something he also emphasized during the session, but also maybe how it was for someone at the third row to speak out loud, to make their voice heard. In a room full of men, maybe how was it different for a woman to make her voice heard? And what was it? What was the substance of it? How was the affect of the space around? And we'll also have maybe some of the readings of the notes of dissent on some of the very key issues which we have today as well. So I won't, this would be a slightly short session before we break for lunch. And I'd now request Professor to take us through this session.
Perfect. Good morning once again. Good afternoon. Right. And so all of us are hungry. I'm not going to take much time. I will just be around, and maybe we'll all do what the members of the Constituent Assembly did. So we'll all imagine that we are all members of the Constituent Assembly. You can choose your roles, but let us, for the time being, be prepared to be anybody, as I said in the morning. So one thing that has become very clear, I think from yesterday's talk and from the morning's discussions, is that we don't have microphones. Okay, there's only one microphone, you have to remember, and there's another microphone which is for the chair. So we have removed the chairman. Okay, this Constituent Assembly does not have a chairperson, there's no chairman. And so everybody is a member. Of course, the ones who are sitting in the first row are not just members, they're not ordinary members, they're extraordinary members. Because you all have fought for the freedom of India, you have fought in the nationalist movement, and you have thrown the British away, and you have now said that we are writing our own constitution. So that is the context. But the beginning will be, and I should know who you are actually. Because there is this thought experiment that John Rawls does in A Theory of Justice, when he says that when we imagine a just society, we go behind a veil of ignorance. We forget who we are. And people who are from political science here, the younger ones, okay, so I'm sure many of you would know about that. But unfortunately, we never work behind a veil of ignorance. That is the problem. We can never forget who we are. Right, so it takes. It took me 20 years or 15 years of feminist activism to forget that I'm a man, and maybe it will take me another 50 years to forget that I'm upper caste. That is how it works in this country, right? Or for people who come from other communities to forget their community, it will take them thousands of years. For the minorities, for the Dalits, for the scheduled castes, the tribals, it will take them another century probably to forget that they are who they are, because our memories are imprinted through our experiences. So for the time being, it would be nice if I could know all of you, but maybe that will take much time. So when you come here, you will introduce. I'll just give you certain ideas. The thing that you're seeing on the screen, I wish. Okay, I'm just randomly picking this. This is from the year. Can anybody guess which year is this? If you can read this, I believe. So let us try and imagine this. This is something that is written by any one of you. Okay, and maybe you can come and read this with your emphasis, leaving it, and then I'll tell you the context of what is written, who has written this. Okay, anybody who volunteers wants to come and read just these two sections, 7 and 8. Anybody who wants to come here? I'd prefer, a young person would be a fine thing. Yeah. You have to read this. I will.
Hello, good afternoon. Lest I may be misunderstood in this connection, I would add that by family I mean that institution which has been developed and which functions today as an association bound together by ties of blood over which the individual concerned has no control. Family, in the sense of a voluntary association of two or more adult individuals who live together for any purpose they choose, will be, will be a matter of the mutual consent of competent individuals joining together for a specific objects with which the social concern will only be that association fits in with the basic system of the planned society. No such association can either override or, what is worse, even by implication, seek to frustrate the very basis of planned society, which in the family as it is organized and functions today, we have every reason to fear may happen.
Okay, we'll stop here. So can you imagine, you have read this, how does this address our contemporary concerns? Does this does this remind you of any form of living that we have now? In our country, we know we have families and we have people who live in, right? People who are in living relations, right? So, does this? So, I just want you all to take note of anything that that this particular passage reminds you of, which is of our own, which is of our contemporary concern, something that is debated in our society now, something which is not very acceptable, something which is radical, something which has gone to the courts and the courts had to interfere in the light of the Indian Constitution. So I'm sure many of you must have by now understood that this is about live-in relationships. This is about a new definition of a family. This is about challenging the idea of a family. Fine.
Yes. Also, Professor,
a
bit to problematize it, is the concept of chosen family that many of the queer individuals struggle for, and then they want a family, but they want a chosen family that again the law doesn't allow them to have.
Perfect. So here we have another twist to the whole argument, and there is a layer to that. So live-in not just between people of the two opposite sexes, but also queer people living together. But the idea here is a voluntary association of not just two, but also of more individuals, adult individuals who live together for any purpose they choose. I think all the words which are important for feminist movement are already here. Choice, agency, you choose, your voluntary association. The numbers can be 2, the numbers can be 3. It can be not for the purpose of procreation, for reproducing. It can simply be for the purpose of doing research or doing anything else. Perfect. Okay, the next one. So we've taken this note. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you read the
The
next
right
section?
to work must be amply cleared for women and made real. The planning authority will therefore have to consider the aggregate amount of work to be done for the community collectively, and the manner in which and the kind of personnel amongst which it will have to be distributed. What will be counted, therefore, would not be men or women, but only individuals, their training and aptitudes, which will also be scientifically determined and certified. Work will therefore be apportioned according to training and abilities, certified for the purpose and not merely because of any relationship that is due to an act of God and not to any personal consent of the party affected.
Perfect. And what comes from this? I would want somebody from here to respond. Equal opportunity to work, fine. Perfect. I think we are.
Certain questions of merit and like how one has the skills have to be enhanced, but I don't know if it really questions the social setting in which different.
So we'll have to read. Here is you are playing the role of this woman, right? And you have to defend this. I'm not telling you who this person is until we come to the. So here is a question that this is not. What did you say? This is not questioning.
Kind of social scenarios these individuals are coming into the workforce, but rather.
Do you think this answers that question? The social scenarios?
I am not sure about
Sure,
it.
maybe we can scroll up and see if there is
Yes, sure.
more
There's
clarification after
something
this.
around it.
Scroll down, maybe. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Right.
Probably it reminds us something around the caste stigma. So I don't know.
Okay.
Yes.
Fine. I think the this must have been assumed that this is written by a woman, right? and if you did not imagine that, then that means that you have still not occupied the position, the place that we wanted to. The first thing is that I personally think that this is a questioning of what we call the gender division of labor. This is simply saying that there is no work which is for man and this is work for woman. There is no such classification. An act of God is basically to say that there is no natural division of labor. And that division of labor can be done by anybody according to a scientific principle based on the training that the person gets, rather than what the society expects the person to do. So, not being a biological being, the individual is an individual, and the question again that repeats from the first two is that there is a lot of idea of what we call the choice of the person, the individual person. Fine, thank you. You may now go and we'll. I think thank you so much. You have to tell who you are. You are Iran, I think.
Yes, my name is Dr. Iram Khan. I
Iram.
teach in Jamia Hamza.
Oh, fantastic. And she's a law professor. Fantastic.
I think we have a note of dissent.
Yes.
At the time at which it was said, many women didn't have the opportunity to get these kind of skills. They weren't allowed in institutions of higher education anyway. So how would they compete?
Right. So the answer, the person who has written this has already maybe taken note of what you have said, and this comes here that there has to be a national code of labor. You know, I'm using the emphasis is on the word code because we have been working through the idea of code since morning. If we think of the Constitution as a code, we should have a national code of labor. And if you read this thoroughly, you will find that what is proposed here is that there should be a code which allows everybody to get all kind of trainings according to their choices, according to their abilities. There are three things that have already happened here. Or maybe two things that have already happened. One is that the sex-gender idea that we consider within histories of feminism that it came only in the 1960s in the West, right, is already, you can see, prefigured here. The second is the whole idea of family has been challenged. There's an alternative system of family that has been imagined here. Now, very interestingly, I think I'll now give you this, because the purpose also of the workshop is to give you some information which has been so far not very much in the light. So let us remember this. Here is one of the most, I would consider, radical, subversive feminist voices that we ever had in India. And this person most people don't even know of. Her name is Kapila Khandwal. And this is, if you're reading this is in itself a note of dissent, written in the year 1938, 1939. So even before the Constitution is built, we can see that Indian women have already started reimagining the entire structure of the society based on some of these ideas. Whether you agree with this or not is not what we want to do, but we are trying to go back to that history. To my mind, this is, as I said, this is a note of dissent. So note of dissent to what? This is a note of dissent to a fabulous committee's report, which is known as the National Committee for the Woman's Role in Planned Economy, established in 1938. This committee had several women members. Actually, this committee had around 12 to 13 authors. All of them, barring one or two, were women, and one of them, Hansa Mehta, came to the Constituent Assembly. So we can see, we can do a genealogy of how these arguments come here. What I want we'll come to that later. Now a few questions, and let us see if you can answer these questions for me. Yes.
Was this Kapila, was she in any way influenced by Rosa Luxemburg?
Yes, absolutely. So this is she is influenced by Rosa Luxemburg, Clara Zetkin. She's very deeply involved in the communist movement, and yes.
I also have an observation.
Yes. Will please all of us. I want let's identify some people. Just hand. How many of you would want to be a part of the drafting committee here? Okay, one person. See, men always want to draft. You see, two men have. Right, so 3 men have agreed to be a drafter, only 2 women. Whereas in the Constituent Assembly, women continuously cribbed that we did not have a say in the drafting committee. They wanted to be part of the drafting committee too. So let us imagine, let us give this task to 1 man and 1 woman. Okay, so, okay, sir, in the last bench. Yeah, you raised your hand, I think. No, we just started. But you need to know, you need to read up a lot before you come to the... Fine, but somebody will have... Okay. So see, the drafting committee is always nominated. You see, drafting committee is always selected by a handful of people. Okay, fine. So there is a choice. So I am not the chair. So let's, by all consensus, sir, you are the drafting committee person. So you have to take a note of the objections that are coming. You have to take note of the currents that are flowing through this discussion. So I think this is a communist current, right? This is a communist ideological position. Yes, ma'am.
I actually want to make an observation, perhaps contest that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm really reminded of Plato and social organization and his education of women, which is a dedicated chapter in the Republic, where the question of aptitude is very much highlighted. And it's an erasure, of course. I mean, I don't think the Western thoughts recalled Plato, or maybe they forgot erasure or forgetting, we don't know. But this idea of aptitude is very much a part and parcel of the education of women. Of course, Plato was talking about the guardian class. I mean, it was not talking about women at, you know, across the board. But it is important that this idea of being marked for a task or labor or job as per aptitude is very much part of it. So I don't think that it is just communist. You know, social organization has thought about it, and especially when Plato talks about his ideal society in the Republic.
Perfect. So this might again, sir, you're taking note of this. So the Constituent Assembly is receiving all kinds of suggestions, beginning with the beginning of Western political thought from Plato onwards. I think around the time when the Constitution was written, Karl Popper was also writing his critique of Plato and calling him an enemy of the open society, but we'll not get into this. I just want to add this information that Kapila Khandelwal is a genuine communist. Okay, even if we do not, historically maybe we can trace it to Plato, her ideas have resonance with Plato's ideas, but when she is coming from, or her ideas are coming from, is from a very genuine communist movement that is happening in the West and also in India. Just keep a note of this, because we'll come to all of this after some time when the same group of people, we will try to elect our representatives to the Constituent Assembly. Would you like to elect someone like this to the Constituent Assembly? Somebody who is saying that we want to have a society in which family will be redefined in these terms, right? How many of, even the women's organizations then would probably find her a bit too radical to say, my God, you want to go to say this to the Constituent Assembly, the next day they will find some trick and throw us out. So whatever little we are going to get, we'll probably not get out of this, right? So that is why she is a note of dissent to the women's movement itself, right? So here is a note of dissent to a dissenting movement. Fine. So you have noted this down. Now I come to this second set of things. Here are a few questions. And these are questions to which you can answer, write. Maybe we will not read all the questions. I will just read some of these questions. And you can answer this from your own groups. For you come from various committees, various communities, various regions, various religions, and so on. So here are some questions. This question has been coming up again and again and again. So let us try and ask this question. See, the interesting thing is that, sorry, what was your name? Nidhi. Right, so please tell your name so that I can remember that. So Nidhi says that the idea of training, the idea of merit, the idea of who can do what is not important. You can see this question is already here. So maybe here's the question. Question number 2. How far is woman entitled, and to what extent is it common for her in your part of the country or in your community to carry on your trade, profession, calling, or engage in any occupation for her own benefit? The important thing here is for her own benefit. Not a woman working for the community, not a woman working for the family, but for her own benefit, or of those dependent on her. And here is not the woman who is dependent on others, but here are other people dependent on women, but subject to her own independent power of control and disposal over the earnings or wages derived from such activities. I'm going back to again the idea of the family. You can see this is all the idea of the family. That even within a family, if a woman is the earner, is the sole breadwinner of the family, does she have power of control and disposal over the earnings or wages derived from such activities? And you cannot just answer this, yes, I know this family and I know that family. The clear instruction is that you have to please append statistics, if you are able to furnish any, in support or clarification of your reply. And then there are again, there's a next question. Are there any trades, professions, callings, occupations, or activities from which women are barred by law, custom, or the regulations of the organization? This is what Nidhi, right? You were saying that the social conditions have not been taken account, but here is a question whether the social conditions actually allowed women to undertake any profession that they wanted to, or whether there was a kind of a prohibition, right? Can we give some answers to these questions now? I mean, maybe you can take this down. Anybody who has an exceptional answer to this question? Do you know from your own family experiences, community experiences, where a woman wanted to follow or pursue a particular trade and profession but was not allowed? The younger generation here? Were all of you allowed to choose whatever? Yes? Can you? So you are noting this down. This is the lived experience of the Indians, right?
Yeah. So I know of a friend, my name is Mariam. I know of a friend who wanted to train to be a pilot, but was not allowed to because it was not a job suitable for a woman.
And this is a particular community?
Yes,
Do you want to name that?
This is in Kashmir. So
this
it's,
is in Kashmir.
yeah.
Fine. I'm sure there are other experiences. This is not just unique to Kashmir. There must be other experiences also. I know of many of my students who wanted to become models. They were not allowed to. They wanted to become scientists. They were not allowed to even study science. I remember, and because you talked of Kashmir, I know of women from the Muslim community in my region who wanted to go out of my hometown, Dumka, to study in Delhi or other places, but they were said that this is not a country safe for Muslim women, as much as it was, so maybe not now. So there are various kinds of handicaps when women want to choose to do something, they are not allowed to do something. But any other examples somebody can give? Historical examples also?
So I'm a postgraduate in political science. My name is Komal. I could think, you are saying historically, so of prostitution. Yeah, and how this would be a challenge to Durgabai Deshmukh later on also, and we have movies also around it, but later on, about prostitution, and even Rohit Day discusses about the complaints which prostitutes were really bringing up to the courts, that they are being not allowed to practice there, and you are asking, that it's written there that people who are dependent on her. So many prostitutes really they made this argument that, see, we had to practice this work of prostitution because many people are dependent on us, on our work, on me. So they were really making that argument. And this could be a challenge to Durgabai Deshmukh later on, I think. Yeah. This could be a challenge to larger women's movement, like, because prostitution is seen in a certain light Okay, it's maybe a kind of a degraded work, a moral thing is attached to it, so it is being abhorred or something like that. But women, other women coming up from a different section of society which are marginalized, prostitutes particularly, and saying that no, it's our work and we will do it. So certain moral attachments are not there.
Thank you. But our drafting committee person is sitting quietly there. Now I want a word to be introduced here. I think the word that has come here is morality. So and the argument that has come from your name, Komal, is that the women's movement or the women's organizations were not very comfortable accepting women as sex workers. We don't use the word prostitute. Yeah, sure, please.
The way we understand the word meaning of prostitutes, I think we are just being very limited in terms of selling sex. But what the prostitutes in holistic manner is anything your body is being used on cost of something. It may not be confined to the sex. So that is what the prostitute mean. I think that is a very narrow meaning of we have been taught or we have been understood. It's not confined to the sex only. This is what I want to make a comment.
So in this context, yes.
May I request your inputs on Durga Bai's position on the whole Devadasi profession, and especially some of those rituals that were carried out by zamindars in Karnataka before a marriage, where particular women had to perform erotic, sort of be part of a procession or displaying eroticism. So in that case, it's a trade. At the same time, it's an abuse, or it's gender playing itself out completely. So where would you put that in this position? Thank you.
So again, I apologize, I'll not give answers because I don't have the answers, and we'll run ahead of our story. So we'll try to see, we are still in 1938. This is the time that we have to remember. But yes, because Durga Bai has been brought in, the word prostitute has been problematized, and I offered the word sex work, which is the current term that people use. Let me, and we have also used the word morality. So the three words for the drafting committee, please be, she's our Dr. Ambedkar, by the way. But please, so she will have to also, because there are speeches that you will have to make in response to the debates happening here. So we have taken three words here. One is the freedom of choice of trade, what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And we have already seen that there are particularities which are emerging where there is discomfort, not just in the larger public sphere, not just in the male-dominated sections of the Constituent Assembly, but also among the women, right? Historically, let me just put it very clearly, that the little history that I know from my own archival work is that women's movement was not entirely against sex work or prostitution. The question of morality was surely there, and these were women from the middle class, upper middle class, so there was some kind of a disgust. But the greatness of these women is that they did not allow their own discomfort to come in between or obstruct the formation of a law which says that every trade should be open to all women, right? This is something that we need to remember. You may have your particular objections and you fear that if we make all professions open for all women, then maybe this might happen. That is number one. The second thing is, and since the morality that we are now talking about is not a morality of what we call, or whose source is the cultural mores of a society, but the morality which is constitutional, which is universal, which is transcendental, or which is based on the individual's right to choice. That is one. This is where I think, sir, I didn't get your name. Ravinder sir said that the word prostitution also needs to be understood in other terms, not just about selling sex, about selling any kind of labor. Any kind of labor. So sometimes we also in our jobs, we say that we are prostituting for the Vice Chancellor, which does not mean that we are literally doing sex work for the Vice Chancellors. It basically means that we are forced to do something that we don't want to do. So the third important idea that comes from this is coercion. labor which you don't want to do, but you are forced to do. And the other opposite of this is labor that you want to do, but you are not allowed to do. So these are the two binaries when we think of choice that emerges from this discussion. Fine. So I think we'll come to this later again. Yes?
When you try to talk about the moral imagination, and when you are counterposing it to the constitutional morality here, I mean, while in your work also, because you try to present a single collaborative authorial intention, sometimes you try to over-glorify what Durgabai Deshmukh's actual views were. I mean, when she was writing, Constituent Assembly is one thing. So that is why I also want to see how does it happen differently in the Constituent Assembly, but when she was writing individually to Nehru, she was not just against sex work, but also she wanted to amend the Article 19, which gives a freedom of profession. And then when we see in the First Amendment, it happens so that the decency and morality. And when you read Durgabai Deshmukh, it is not constitutional morality, it is the regressive morality of a society, of an elitist society that is actually taking place. And when she mentions Rohit Dey mentions about Husnabai's case. Meenakshi has been mentioning since morning, since yesterday, Rohit Dey's work, and then you will realize with what disgust did Durgabai Deshmukh talks about. I mean, I don't want to call prostitutes because sex working, because there were also gharanas of dancers who introduced themselves, and they were their trade, not just trade, but they're also their talent. Yes, yes, and then everything, because that is how a Hindu woman would paint a fabric, everything with that disgust, and then that is not constitutional morality what we see. And then when you talk about moral imaginary, can you also throw light on how did a Constituent Assembly where collaboration was happening between different women, how did that change? Because it was not in the Constitution. Constitution did not have a decency or morality. But when constantly she's writing to Nehru in her personal aspect, that is being changed. So that is something.
Thank you so much for saying this. And this will again, because I don't want to run ahead of time. So one thing that I thought I mentioned is that you also learn to keep silent in a particular space. So Durgabai in an independent capacity writing to Nehru and Durgabai saying something in the Constituent Assembly are two different things. This is also something that we are trying to reimagine here. When I say collaboration, it also means that when I and you don't agree on something, I will keep my own opinion in the back burner, or if you don't agree with me at all, maybe I will write independently, I'll try to do things differently, but not exactly there. There are occasions which may come later on, maybe today or in the afternoon session, when we'll see the differences among the women members, right? So Durgabai's position on certain things are different from the position that Renuka Ray takes, or Ammu Swaminathan takes, or even Kamala Devi takes, but Kamala Devi is not directly here. So we will not do away with all of them. This is precisely the question, this is precisely why I think the word constitutional morality needs to be kept in mind. I did not use the word constitutional morality immediately, we used the word morality. Even Dr. Ambedkar, in his own political position, in his own political life, had certain other views, but when he comes to the Constituent Assembly, he tries to converge with the overall view of the Constituent Assembly to come to a consensus. That is what the whole idea of collaboration is about. So we will keep in mind, these are some of the, let us say, as I heard some kind of a rage in your speech, no, which is fine, which I would say that these are some of the things that will haunt us even now. So the archaeology that we are doing of the Constituent Assembly does not only throw up very good things, this also throws up some of those things that will trigger more and further debate, right? What is the Constitution's position on the entire thing is not for me to decide. I'm not a legal person again, as I said, but I think it is again the same Constitution which allows people like sex workers to fight for their rights to the trade, right? And that has happened without the women's interruption, if you want to use that word. Okay, fine. So we have now come to at least 3-4 major ideas which are part of the Indian Constitution. One is, of course, the idea of the individual, who is at the center, who is at every point challenging the idea of the family, challenging the idea of the community. The second is the idea of work, trade, the freedom to work, freedom of choice, freedom of profession. Yes.
Right to work in terms of understanding the work means we are being socialized and being taught or maybe learned from the society the way work means going out of the away from the home. I mean, not the homework was not being considered as a work. trade. So this is again to be confined to somebody going to out of the house and earning something. That is only considered some trade profession, but the homework was never being considered as a major role to play in the work, and which doesn't have the monetized value. So it is being normally considered as a profession.
Thank you, sir. I think I mentioned it yesterday. I don't have an archival document right now which I can display here. 1931 onwards, the women's organizations had started asking for the recognition of the economic value of the housework done by women. And we'll very soon come to this. This particular document also, this whole set of questionnaires will lead us to a kind of a recommendation which says that the work that women do in the homes need to be recognized. So it's not that it has not been recognized. Yes?
I was wondering, and it's really a position of ignorance, whether this opens up or did open up the invocation of alternative paradigms in terms of social, in terms of labor. Because if you look at, if you move away from the mainstream middle class communities, middle class, I'm not talking about today's middle class, but what we understand at the time, then marginalized communities like tribal women, they have been, they had this question too, how far is women entitled to what, etc. Earning for the community, going into the market, selling goods, having right over her earnings, and actually sometimes even becoming a trustee for the family. So those are, I don't know if those ideas were brought in, but they are definitely invoked in question 2 and question 3.
I'll very quickly run through all the questions. Sir, very, very brief. One.
To know that you mentioned, I think I heard that I'm not a legal person. I mean, how does that change the interpretation of what is being stated in your understanding?
What changes?
You said that I'm not the legal person.
Yes.
So what is the meaning of the sentence?
My interpretation might be different from a legal interpretation?
No, you said that I'm not a legal person to comment on something.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand that how does it...
No, basically what I was trying to do, that was a rider, that was a disclaimer to say, don't expect from me an interpretation of a clause of the Indian Constitution. Because that has been done by the Supreme Court, that is done by constitutional lawyers, and I am not an expert on that. I am trying to work as a kind of just a citizen, looking at the documents of the making of the Constitution and seeing what are the debates that went into the making of the constitutions. My positions on these debates may or may not agree with the positions historically taken. My positions might not be the same as the constitutional law of India allows, but that is not what I am qualified to talk about. I'm just trying to create a condition in which we see that the debates of the Constituent Assembly have a resonance with the debates that we are having now. And where do we place the Constitution in between these two time spaces? That's all we are trying to do here. And maybe at the end of the workshop, we will try to see if we can interpret the Constitution in a different manner. It might be a very radical, it might be a very different interpretation from what the women wanted us to do. That's precisely what I'm trying to do. Fine, so we have come to these arguments, and the purpose of taking you to 1938 was simply to say that women did not come to the Constituent Assembly by an accident. That they came to the Constituent Assembly after very thorough thinking about what kind of society we need. These questionnaires, I'm just reading some of them for you. See, this is a question that you asked, question number 5. How many efforts have been made in your part of the country to organize women workers in these and other occupations for the purposes mentioned above? And those are primarily for their own selves. And if any have been made, will you please add a brief summary? Then there are these questions about the safety of women workers. Question number 7. Would you consider any particular type of employment as especially undesirable for women? or in which, even if women be allowed to seek employment, special precautionary measures may have to be adopted to safeguard their health, person, or to protect them adequately in any of the common incidents of women's lives. The following are suggested by way of illustration only. Defense services, particularly those connected with active operations in wartime, and armaments industries, mining, occupations involving night work away from home, example Gracia, daily newspaper work, film production or acting in general, other occupations requiring women employees to work in isolation or with male colleagues only, example Gracia, office secretaries. Shorter prohibiting such occupations to women seeking and qualified for such employment, what measures would you suggest for affording adequate protection to women workers in such occupation? The one thing that has to become will become very clear, it's a very accelerated time. Every single year, you see the questions are becoming more and more intense. The questions are encompassing more number of things. I mean, all these debates are still running in this country. And every single year, you will see that they're giving different kinds of answers to these questions. So that is what I'm trying to come to this. Okay, thank you. So what I'll do is I'll wrap up this one. I will give you a very quick summary of the recommendations that were made by this particular. Do we have the? Sorry, where is the folder? Yes, yes. Yes.
About using the word sex work.
Yes.
And those issues have not been settled even today.
No.
One of the very prominent members of the IWC was here.
Yes.
Personally stood very much against the use of the term sex work, saying it was sanitizing the moral dimension or the immoral dimension.
Right.
So I don't want to say that I don't believe that AIWC had a united view on it. Those battles have raged
even beyond that. That's precisely the point, that all the women members did not have the same position on certain issues. When we talk about their collaboration, it's a common program. And the idea that probably will emerge from discussing is that when we have particular issues, we allow to create a general position and then maybe keep the exceptions for to be resolved at a later date. So sex work is an exception to the general rule that women should be allowed to participate in all kinds of work. But this exception is something which they keep muted. They do not want to voice it very openly in the Constituent Assembly. That is what I call the strategy of the feminist movement then. So that is why it's not been resolved. And then AIWC became, I think, labeled as a conservative organization, and it did not take. But see, the same organization which we are talking about now, it is very difficult to call it a conservative organization in 1938. That we have to remember that this is being said in 1938. But since it has come up, and I did not want to share the history here, I wanted it to come from here. But there will be 2-3 examples that I'll give. I don't know, I will look more into the Durgabai papers again. But I want to remember that Durgabai was one of the first women who actually took the reform, or we use the word reform, but rehabilitation of sex workers. She was as young, when she was 13 years old or 14 years old, she was the one person who brought in the prostitutes, quote unquote, and their resources and fed it into the nationalist movement. So her position on sex work is something that needs to be, I think, understood in the light of her other activities also. You look at the social work that she did. If you look at the entry on prostitution in the Encyclopedia of Social Work, or there is a Social Work and Social Reform, 2 volumes that she wrote, you will find that a lot of her positions that she took in 1948-49 change when she comes to the position of a leading social worker of this country. So this is important to remember that, I mean, the one reason why we chose Lakshmi to be Ambedkar, and I say that I am a woman, is also to remember that ourselves keep changing. We do not walk into a space and walk out of the same space as the same person. So when Durgabai walks into the Constituent Assembly, she has certain views. When she walks out of the Constituent Assembly, her view changes. The same thing happens with Dakshayani Velayudhan, who has huge reservations against upper caste women when she walks into the Constituent Assembly. But having worked with them for 3 years, when she comes out, her position changes. She actually says that Ambedkar's suggestion of intercaste marriages will annihilate caste is not a worthy position, because intercaste marriages will also continue working within class system of the society. So you see how these people, we have to think of these women are also as learners. Some of the debates will come later. I will just want to read, I think some of you have been the Charter of Women's Rights.
Yes.
The charter isn't it here? I think it's here. So the purpose here is, but I would like the other female members here to speak. I mean, this is again a huge problem. I mean, what is it that's preventing the young women sitting here to intervene? I mean, if I ask this question, will you take some time? Yes?
I'm a PhD student. Who's hoping to work on refugee establishments in Delhi that came up after the partition, right? And because I'm working on that, I'm reading a lot of literature about the partition. One of the issues that came up after the partition was the issue of transferring women from India and Pakistan, right? The idea being that Muslim women belong to Pakistan and Hindu women belong to India, right? Because we were talking about choice, because we were talking about constitutional morality. I just wanted to understand the idea of constitutional morality in that scenario, wherein it was also heavily debated at that time.
We have an entire session to that in the second half.
Okay,
so we'll come to that. It's not irrelevant at all. Thank you so much.
I feel we did not give enough space to the first question. That was around right to property, especially with the Shariat Application Act coming in 1937 that gave women all the right as per Sharia, but excluded agricultural land, for instance. So everything with regard to Muslims would be governed by Sharia, except and then you have people like Archana Parashar writing that 99% of the idea of property at that time was agricultural land.
Yes.
So, I think
so we will come again to that when we talk about the Hindu Code Bill. See, I'm so glad. So now the topics are coming from you. But the idea was that we will move historically, step by step, and we will not anticipate the debates, but unfortunately, we are also eager to get our constitution. We don't want to wait for the time. So I will just quickly read through this, or if somebody wants to read like Hansa Mehta, this is. I want you to remember the word. The first sentence here is, during the past 18 years. It's very important to remember. This is an 18 years period that we are talking about. In 18 years, AIWC and the other women's organizations have moved from one position to a very different position, right? From being a nearly conservative social work kind of an organization for the education of women, it starts taking up a lot of other questions. I think it is very important to remember that it is only when many of us here, I believe, are professors. And when we engage with education, we are dragged into other issues. Why should I bother about sex work? But when I talk to my students, I think this issue comes. Why should I bother about family rights and domestic violence? But when I go to the classroom and I find a student talking to me and saying that there was domestic violence at my home and I couldn't finish my assignment, I'm dragged into that kind of a debate. It's almost a kind of AIWC's, I would say, a metonymic journey of AIWC, an organization that started only looking at why women are not educated in this country. What should we do for the education of women? They realized that this is just a single point agenda and will never work unless we look into the other aspects of women's lived experiences. So 18 years of AIWC existence, there are many resolutions that they make. They challenge their own resolutions also, which will maybe at the end of the workshop I will make a kind of a file for all of you and email it to you. You can take a printout or you can read on your own. We are trying to save paper. But the many resolutions of the AIWC can now be thought of as having reached a kind of a conclusive shape. And this is a draft of a charter of rights of women that they have written. I will read a few sections. This is important. The object of this charter is to crystallize these resolutions with a view to give a clear picture of the ideals for which we stand. And you will see they will not mention sex work here, right? And you also must remember that Durgabai is not a member of the IWC. Okay, to form a basis for future remedial legislation and for the creation of opportunities for women for service for their attainment. Okay, these demands are embodied in the chapter, are by no means final. So 1945 also, they do not think, this is 1946 actually, they think that this is still a tentative demand. As many of us know, feminist revolution, we use the word the unfinished revolution. It is never complete. It's always an incomplete revolution. You keep making demands, you know that these are contingent, you challenge them. So she says that changing circumstances and conditions may necessitate corresponding changes. I read this as a kind of a, again to use the word constitutional morality, as a kind of humility that any generation should have, that we cannot create a constitution forever. For all the generations to come, to accept that what we know is from our own experiences, we have our own limitations, and these might change with time. So changing circumstances and conditions may necessitate corresponding change. I wish somebody could read this out, and also, do you want to come and read this? Okay. This is the preamble of this charter. Okay, we read the preamble of the Indian Constitution. Can you read just this one? Yes, and you tell me who you are?
I'm Pragya.
Pragya. So Pragya will read the charter, and the context is that this is not being read. Let me tell you, this is read in 1946 at a place called Interlaken in Switzerland. Okay. This is not being read, I mean this has of course been read in other places, but this time she is reading it in Switzerland at the conference, the 14th International Conference of the International Alliance of Women, which is itself an alliance of many women's organizations from all over the world. It is there that Hansa Mehta is supposed to, or Hansa Mehta is not, she's the vice president of that organization, but she's herself not present. So here is somebody who is reading it, who is Pragya, who is reading it on behalf of her. Okay, I'm forgetting the name of the person, but here is a Marathi woman who actually represents Hansa Mehta in this conference and presents this particular charter. So just read the preamble for us.
Whereas we believe that freedom and equality are essential to human developments, and whereas woman is as such a human being as man, and therefore entitled to share them with him. Whereas we believe that well-being and progress of society depend on the extent to which both men and women are able to develop their full personality and are cognizant of their responsibilities to themselves and to each other. Whereas we believe that women has thus a definite role to play in the building of a free, healthy, prosperous and moral society, and that she can fulfill the obligations only as a free and responsible member. Whereas we believe that the position of women in India is far from satisfactory and is a large measure responsible for backwardness of the country. We think it essential that the status of Indian women is be improved and brought on a par with that of a man, so that she may contribute her legitimate share to the general reconstruction of the life of this country and to a wider world. It is with this object in view that we have framed our demands with regard to the rights of Indian women, whether as an individual or as a member of society, and desire that they should form the basis of future legislation.
Thank you, Pragya. Thank you. The idea that probably has come to you, or maybe many of you must have read echoes of the objectives resolution that we heard in the morning. So here is the justification of the rights. That is what we were trying to, when we think of constitutional imagination or moral imaginary and so on, I think one of the major epistemological questions that emerges is, what is the rationale behind this demand, right? You may demand this, you may demand that, you may agree with this demand, you may not agree with this demand, but there is a kind of an attempt to find an abstract principle on which everybody has to agree before we make the constitution, and that is precisely what the Indian constitution is. So when we talk about the legitimacy of a law in this country, we call it the constitutionality of the law. Right? It's not constitutionally legitimate. So here are the rules, here are the reasons. I will read some of them again, and thank you so much, Pragya, for giving your voice to this. This is Indian women talking to the women of the world. That's one of the first things that we notice. The second is, the two terms that they use are freedom and equality. The word is not liberty, mind you. The word is freedom and equality. Then the second word is, whereas woman is as much a human being as man. We already heard that she was the person who intervened in the UDHR and said the word woman has to be removed. And then she says that she's entitled to share them with him. The well-being and progress of society. So it's not just about the progress of the society, but also the material well-being of the society. Not the society only in the liberal framework, but the material well-being. So these are I'm not, again, we don't have documents, but I'm sure if this goes to you as a kind of a homework, you will see that there are at least a dozen such human rights documents which begin with the word whereas. And this is an evidence of the, what I would call the intertextuality of women's charter, or the rights of the charter of rights that they have, that the texts that they have produced are not standalone texts, but these are texts which are also part of the larger dialogue here. Look at some of the demands that they make, and then I will probably have to close this session at 2 o'clock. We've already 5 minutes. Oh God. Sorry. So I'll just read very quickly some of the rights that they have made. This might remind you of. So the first thing is that there is a fundamental rights, you see, and the fundamental rights are, then again, you see, whereas in a democratic society, the word democracy is already here. Many of you would have heard of the Karachi Congress resolution of 1931. There is debate as to who wrote it. The entire credit is usually given to Jawaharlal Nehru for having drafted that. There is evidence that the women members, or there were women also who participated in the drafting of that Karachi resolution. A number of the rights in the fundamental rights Karachi resolutions, there is this reference to women's, have reference to sex as a category. So the first idea is that the fundamental rights, this is for a democratic society. A lot of debate again. Sir, आपका नाम बताइए मुझे, मैं भूल रहा. Yes, you, yeah, Shubham. One of the other things, because you talked about Durga Bain, it will keep coming to me now, because one of the interesting things is that for the women members here, the challenge was to create a democratic women's movement in India. Now that is also a big challenge. How do you have democracy in a country which is so diverse? It's not an easy thing, especially when women don't speak, women don't have literacy, when women don't have access to traveling, and so on. So how do you do this? The other things, you will see there are lots of debates here. The three major female figures in the Constituent Assembly consistently argue that democracy in India can only come with socialism. There is no democracy without socialism. Capitalism and democracy cannot go together, which is actually quite the reverse of the current political thought, right? So they think that democracy and capitalism work together. So I want you to remember this, because this is happening. This has been happening from 1931 onwards. So she says that whereas in a democratic society, no citizen can be denied the fundamental rights which are founded on the basis of human equality, and whereas women in this country are denied some of these rights, the All India Women's Conference affirmed that all citizens are equal before the law, irrespective of caste, creed, or sex. No disability attaches to any citizen by reason of his or her religion, caste, creed, or sex. In regard to public this is a very small section on fundamental rights. I take 2 words for all of you to remember when we come back to the concluding sessions. The one thing that is to be remembered here, I mean, anybody who looks at the All India Women's Conference documents will see that before 1947, the All India is always hyphenated. It's All hyphen India Women's Conference. And later on it becomes All separate, India separate, Women's Conference separate. So if you actually do a kind of an abbreviation, it should be AWC rather than AIWC. This is something that may have interpretations. I interpret it as a kind of an impact of the partition. This is also, this hyphen is a kind of a trace of the haunting of Pakistan, because all India, we have to bring India together. And this notion that there is a kind of a division which is already happening here. It is important to remember that within the AIWC also, there were Muslim members. Some of them, Begum Jahanara Shahnawaz being one of the primary members, who chose Pakistan, who worked with Jinnah, who thought that Pakistan is probably the answer to the problems that we have here. The second word that I thought I'll just leave you with is the word disability. No disability attaches to any citizen. This is a word which we have to retrieve. I mean, I have been asked this question many times. What did they say about disabled people? What are the disability rights? Now, this disability, of course, does not mean that physical disabilities that we have. But she talks about disabilities that do not attach to any citizen by reason of his or her religion, caste, creed or sex. The word disability is also important here to remember, because it continuously keeps coming through the Constituent Assembly debates, and it is one of the central words in the women's movement, international women's movement of that time, that women are capable of doing things. I'm reminded of Amartya Sen's capability approach also, when he talks about freedom as the development of your capabilities, right? So you talk about freedom as one of the fundamental values, and you talk about disabilities which take away that freedom from you. And these are disabilities which are largely caused by the social organizations, social institutions. And they are the 3 or 4: religion, caste, creed or sex. Caste is an important word here, because again, a lot of these are minor words here. These are words which have largely been lost, because we usually think that this is an elite women's organization and they are not interested in the question of caste, they are not interested in the question of intersectionality and so on. But caste is very much present in the very first draft chapter that we have. We had this word sex yesterday. Maybe we'll have to take that after the lunch session. That the word sex is does not mean gender. I talked about it. We will have a session. We'll see each time the AIWC or the members of the founding mothers are participating. Each time there is a discussion on disability, they bring the word sex, because they think that sex is one of the biggest disabilities that we have here. Not a biological disability, but a disability which has been socially induced on us. So this is, I think, where we will stop today. I will quickly, sir, you had mentioned this question of the family, so I will come. This is an absolutely, I think, important document. This should be considered. Women and work. We should, because we have been talking about work for some time. You see, these are arguments that they are making. No woman should be debarred from any work except on grounds of health. As for example, nursing and expectant mothers who must be debarred from work in heavy industries or underground work in mines. While women workers should have the same facilities as men workers with regard to pay, which should be a living wage, etc., etc., they should also be allowed special facilities by way of creches for their babies, restrooms for expectant and nursing mothers, milk canteens for their children, break during the work for expectant and nursing mothers, maternity benefits, which should form part of a comprehensive scheme of social insurance. I take this also as an example of, because we had this debate today on the question of equality. So they are continuously saying that we are equal, but they're also making special demands. The idea of affirmative action, the idea of positive discrimination, the seeds of that are already here. Reservation, I think I will not get into the whole debate, maybe later on. You can think about it. Reservations are one aspect of affirmative action. There are many other aspects of affirmative action. If we focus only on reservations, we forget the other seeds of affirmative action that were planted by the women in the making of the Constitution. And this is what we said. This is the question that we were asking since morning. This is about the woman as homemaker, whereas the work of the housewife has so far received no recognition in the sense that no steps have been taken or thought for the protection of one who works from morning till night without rest or leave or holiday. And whereas we believe that the work of a housewife to be as important as any other, it is essential in the interest of these women who are the home workers and the mothers of the race. This is a phrase to which some people object. Take steps for the raising of their status, for the protection of their health. So these are the demands, you see. And one of the demands is that the woman will have a share in the right to the husband's income, which she will use as she likes. The other is that the husband shall have no right to dispose of his entire income without the consent of his wife. And then she talks about social insurance and other things. So I will probably stop here. This session. The purpose was not to go into the Constituent Assembly directly. The purpose was to make sure that when we come to the Constituent Assembly, we know that there has been at least 18 years or 20 years of very rigorous thinking about women's position. These documents are detailed documents. We can't read all of them here. But when we come back, we'll look at the notes of dissent, we'll look at the speeches that these women make, and this time I will not speak, I'm sure. Sorry. And then maybe the speakers or whoever listens will see that this speaker comes from a historical background. That is the purpose that we'll try to meet in the second session. We'll listen to Ambedkar in the afternoon. And Ambedkar, I thought of the whole idea of Ambedkar's being present in the drafting committee is because even though he was not in the drafting committee before August, he was already a member of the Fundamental Rights Committee and the Minorities Committee. He was listening to all these debates. You will see that in his speeches, he's continuously trying to assuage the fears of these women, that we know what your demands are. And I'm trying to draft a constitution, I'm trying to draft a clause which will address your demands. So these demands were already in the public sphere. Thank you.